He is currently the Executive Vice Chancellor of K through 12 in the Division of Public Schools at the Florida Department of Education. He previously served as a teacher, assistant principal, and assistant superintendent before taking the helm as superintendent of Flagler Schools. Throughout his career, he has continued to put kids first, and we are excited to have him with us today. Please welcome Chancellor Jacob Oliva.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to be here. As Dominique so much more eloquently said, my name is Jacob Oliva, and I'm the Chancellor for the Division of Public Schools at the Florida Department of Education. And I'm excited to spend a little bit of time with you here this morning. So I think I have about 45 minutes or so, and some of the highlights that we saw in that promotional video, I want to have a little bit deeper discussion, and then hopefully, if there's time, maybe just engage in a dialogue, a question and answer session, and make sure that if there's any burning questions or issues that you want to bring to our attention, we want to make sure that we give proper time and due diligence. So I have a little bit of a PowerPoint. I don't know if we can pull that up, and I'll just kind of go through some of the slides. So as they're pulling it up, I do want to formally thank Pastor Rick, Keith Flaw, and the team here at the Florida Citizens Alliance for their support of the work that we're engaged with in the Department of Education. I can tell you that a lot of interested or vested organizations want to support the Department of Education or want to provide input on the work that we're doing and have their voice heard. And I can tell you a lot of those specialized kind of critiqued organizations, when we really ask them to roll up their sleeves and be engaged and get deeper into the work and really have more thoughtful conversations around the product that we're trying to create, a lot of those people that had opinions and interests just kind of faded to the side. But the folks at the Florida Citizens Alliance, they really, truly rolled up their sleeves, got us connected, not just with experts here in the state of Florida, but experts around the nation to give us input and feedback, and did it all pro bono, and because they really cared and because they were passionate about their work. And anytime that we've reached out to the team at the Florida Citizens Alliance and said, hey, we need some help, can you help us review some products, or do you know anybody that we can connect with that's an expert in certain content areas? Without a doubt, 100% of the time, they answer the call, they step up to the plate, and they provide those supports for us. So for me to be here today to stand in front of you and thank you for supporting the Florida Citizens Alliance, but make sure that the team at the Florida Citizens Alliance knows that we do value our partnership. It truly is something that we value and appreciate. So thank you for giving me some time to be here today and share a little bit about what we're doing. But I had a couple topics that I was going to go through today. We've got some national rankings. A lot of questions I've been getting about is how are we handling with COVID and reopening schools. So I want to spend some time talking about that. A little bit of an update on where we are with our standards implementation. We heard about that in our video. We have what we're calling our B.E.S.T standards, and that it's an acronym for Benchmarks for Excellent Student Thinking. And we're rolling those out for English Language Arts and Math. We're currently in a Civics standards review, so that's something that we're getting a lot of statewide interest. So I want to talk a little bit about how that lines to the work we did in English Language Arts and Math and where we're going with Civics. And then we did some really neat work in required instruction around mental health and human trafficking and substance abuse that I think is of interest for this keynote today. Is a lot of what we're talking about. A little bit about some of our wins working with our legislature, and then talk a little bit about the Hope Scholarship. So we get a lot of people that do national rankings, and one of the groups that consistently ranks states and gives them grades across the different metrics is a group called Quality Counts by Education Week. And they just came out with their 2020 ranking, and Florida has moved up. We were fourth best state in the nation for the previous couple of years, but we just recently moved up to the number 3 best state in the nation for student performance, for post-secondary outcomes, for advanced participation. If if we can go to the next slide, I'm on that next slide. So it's really nice to see some of those rankings come up. One of the interesting metrics that they do use to calculate their grade is the dollars spent per student. So we actually get knocked down a little bit because we're efficient with our tax dollars. And when we look at the average cost per student that we spend in the state of Florida, it's much less than what other states spend, but we're still getting superior outcomes. So that's a testament to our school boards, our school superintendents, our leaders, and the work that they're doing. Talk a little bit about COVID and the impact that that's had on Florida. So as many of us are aware, back in March, as we were learning about this pandemic, we had to make a lot of pretty big decisions in the state of Florida about what was going to happen to our way of life almost. And in March, we were just about to go on to spring break in most of our school districts. And at that time, when we were looking at some of those projection models, and we didn't know a lot about the science around COVID or the impact or how it's going to transmit through teachers, through students, we had to make a lot of tough decisions. And in March at the state, we decided to ask all school districts to consider extending spring break for a couple weeks so that we can get a handle on what was happening. Well, I think at that time, we were very optimistic and hopeful that this was just going to be a couple weeks. We'll have our students back into our classrooms by May. We can get them into graduation and prom. They can say goodbye to their teachers, clean out their lockers. But as we all know, that extended spring break continued on through the summer. So as we were kind of what we would say pivoting on the way we connected with students, one of the things that I think is remarkable for the state of Florida is that when we asked districts to kind of turn the light switch off on the way we did teaching and learning and connect with students and develop what we call instructional continuity plans, they basically had about 5 days to write a plan and work with the department to see how we can continue with some sort of education in a distant and remote environment. While we were going through that, our districts really stepped up to the plate. And I've often always said, I think we have the best teachers, the best leaders in the nation and in the state, and the work that they did and the creative solutions that they were able to put into place to overcome some of the challenges to stay connected with students was truly remarkable. And in fact, Florida was recognized nationally. I served on some national panels where other states were asking us, how did you do what you did and be able to stay connected? So while we had a complete pivot on the way we ended our school year, we stayed connected with the majority of our students and families to make sure that teaching and learning continued because we needed that continuity throughout the state. I can tell you there was a lot of other states that just said, we're going to send our students home and not bring them into class, and did nothing with those students for the rest of the year. And for us, it was important to make sure that we stay connected with our students and our families and look at making sure that we continue with high quality learning environments. So as we are moving forward with reopening schools, one of the things that was very important to us is making sure that parents had choices and make sure that parents had options. It was really interesting because while distance learning worked well for a lot of our students, it did not work well for all of our students. And as the policy folks or the kind of leaders in the state, we need to create the conditions that set up all of our students for success. And early on in June, we started surveying parents about what did they want for options for their children to start school in August. And it was really interesting because it kind of fell into that rule of a third. About a third of our parents wanted schools open 5 days a week and wanted a place to send their children each and every single day. About a third of our parents said, we're not comfortable yet sending our children back to school and we want some kind of virtual or distance learning option. And about a third of our parents were like, we're not really sure yet. We're just kind of trying to go through day by day. So early on, as we were looking at how are we going to reopen schools, because we have academic calendars. We have so many hours of instruction that we need to get in for our students to get a year's worth of work. And we knew we needed to start getting schools open in August. Commissioner Corcoran and Governor DeSantis gave us some of those tools that we could use to provide some statutory flexibility so that districts could have those creative learning options. So every single district in the state of Florida has reopened in some form or fashion in August. There's 3 districts that have not returned to full-time face-to-face learning, and that's Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade, as they've been in different phases of reopening. When we closed schools or extended that spring break that turned into the end of the year, at that time the state of Florida the whole state was in what we called phase 1 of managing and negating through the COVID crisis. But then in, I want to say April-ish, most of the state moved back to phase 2, except for those 3 South Florida districts. They just recently, in the last couple of weeks, came out of phase 1, and we're working with creating options for those students so that they can come back. But we were able to give the district some flexibility in creating learning plans that gave parents choices and options. And one of those conditions that we wanted to work with districts was to make sure that schools were open 5 days a week. If a parent and a student needed a live face-to-face instruction, that what we call that direct instruction, we needed to create that option because distance learning worked well for some students, but we serve a diverse population of students that make up a lot of different needs. We have a lot of students from lower socioeconomic status that may not have access to internet. They may not have access to devices, and that is a real challenge. And we learned that really quick when we asked districts to do distance learning. Children and families that had devices and internet, they made a much easier transition than students that don't have that. We have a lot of children that are food insecure and they need a place to go, and that's where they get their food. And the schools are the hub of our community, and we want to make sure those doors are open to serve those students and those families. We have a lot of students that are learning English as a second language. We have a lot of students with specific learning disabilities or special needs. We have migrant students, we have homeless students, and we know that distance or remote learning may not be the most optimum environment for all of them. But we do have a lot of families that were successful in distance learning, and they want to continue to do that. And then we are also able to work with districts to do what we call synchronous or asynchronous learning, kind of a hybrid model in the middle. We had some families that said, we're ready to enroll full-time virtual. We had some families that said, I want a seat in a teacher's class on a roster, but I'm not 100% right there ready to send them back to school. But when we become more comfortable, we want to do that. And then we had some families that said, we're ready to go back face-to-face. So if you look at that one slide with the map of Florida, it kind of breaks down where our students are now. So I know this doesn't equal 100%. That's because we have our 3 largest districts are still in a little bit of non-full-time reopening, but about 62% of our families and students are coming to school full-time, face-to-face, 5 days a week, which is remarkable that our district leaders, our local school boards are able to put those conditions in place to keep those students safe and our teaching faculty safe, our educational families safe, and provide that direct content. And then about half of them are still kind of coming full-time. Some are coming every other day, kind of that flexible, innovative space in meeting the needs of the students and families. And about 4% of our students are enrolled in full-time virtual education, which last year it was about 1%. So 3% increase doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a lot more students when we have almost 2.8, 2.9 students statewide. So staying connected with those students is something that is of priority for us and something that we're working in. So the next slide talks about how we've all been impacted by COVID. It's all changed kind of our way of work and what we're trying to do and create those conditions to set up students for success. But some of our students are hit more by this impact. And one of the challenges that we've been really working through is identifying students that have experienced some type of trauma. And when we look at what happened in March and implemented distance learning, and then in the summer, while schools did a great job staying connected with most of the students, there are some students that went home in March that the schools have not been able to get reconnected with. And that's a big concern of ours. So there's this term that we call in education called the summer slide. And that's kind of the learning loss that happens in the summer when kids go home for June and July, and teachers have that challenge of catching them back up so that we can get them on grade level before. Well, there's another term that there is called the COVID slide, and that's what happened between March and April and May. Then you compound that with the summer slide and the fact that we have some students that have not been connected with a teacher or adult and engaged in learning. Finding those students and bringing them back into school to get direct instruction is our utmost sense of urgency right now, because we have to mitigate learning loss the best that we can. And schools are moving forward in making sure that they can step up for that challenge. Interestingly enough, if going to the next slide, making sure we stay connected with those students. Right now, it's kind of an interesting time in our schools, because some of our school districts open August 10th, some open around August 24th, some open August 31st. We gave flexibility and local decision making and control for those folks to set those calendars when they needed. But when school opens, this is kind of something that we do in education every year, is after about the first 10 days of schools, we start going through those attendance records, and there's this file that we call DNEs. Basically, it stands for did not enter. And that's when schools really start figuring out like who is supposed to be here but hasn't come in. And we've been having calls with superintendents over the last couple of weeks and working with school districts, because districts are reporting to us statewide they're missing a lot of students. We want to make sure we find every student. So if you had a school district that you're expecting about 10,000 students, right now they may have connected about 9,500 of them, but there could be about 500 students in that district that have not shown up to school, have not registered for virtual school, have not signed up for the innovative option. And we need to find out where these students are. And even like around here in the I-4 corridor, been talking with the superintendents in the big districts here, and they're worried that families moved or lost because of the economic downturn with the tourism industry and the furloughs with a lot of our theme parks, that this impact is going to be profound, and we're still getting a handle on that. Another interesting kind of phenomenon that we're seeing statewide is our kindergarten enrollments is pretty far down. And in Florida, we have compulsory attendance, but that starts at age 6. So typically when somebody would be in kindergarten or almost that first grade level. So a lot of parents, I think, are choosing not to send their child to kindergarten. So if they were able to keep them in some kind of early learning or pre-K environment, they may be deciding to do that for another year. I'm of the belief that a lot of these families will start showing back up in January, maybe after the holiday break, and they get a little bit more comfort level. But that's something that we're going to have to monitor closely to see what's happening with our kindergarten enrollment and making sure those students are ready to come into our schools. Kindergarten readiness is a big deal for the state of Florida. If kids aren't coming to school ready to learn, sometimes it could take years to catch those students up. So there's some big challenges that we've been having with COVID, but we're stepped up to the challenge. And I know we have some legislative delegation here, and I'm sure this will be a topic of discussion as we're getting ready to start committee weeks in session and making sure that we can support families and students and school districts throughout the state of Florida. So I'm going to transition real quick to where we are with our Florida's B.E.S.T standards. Part of that introduction video talked about the work that we've been engaged with at the state and under Commissioner Corcoran's leadership. One of the big initiatives that we were able to accomplish with his support and Governor DeSantis, when he first came into administration, he signed an executive order. It was 1932, which was a big deal for us because that asked the State Department of Education to eliminate Common Core from our standards. And when we talk about Common Core standards, there's really two subject areas that falls under, and that's English Language Arts and Math. So to give you a little bit of perspective where we are as a state and why standards are important, those standards, when we talk about academic standards, they basically outline what we expect students to know and learn at each grade level for every subject area. So when we create that expectation, that is the foundation that we build our educational system on. So when we say that in kindergarten, every kindergarten needs to know how to add to 10 or recite their alphabet and say their sight words, and we set that expectation. That's what we want all of our students to be able to do. Well, then we send those expectations out to textbook companies that write textbooks around those expectations, and then our assessments get built around those expectations. So getting strong standards is something that's important because it's really, it aligns with our curriculum, and then that's what the teachers use to develop lessons for our instruction, and then that's what we build assessments around. We call it the CIA, Curriculum Instruction Assessment. It all starts with having good standards. Well, standards aren't new to the state of Florida. In fact, Florida adopted the first set of standards in 1997, and at that time they were called the Sunshine State Standards. For some of you guys that remember that, and the first assessment that came along with that to measure whether or not students are learning what we expect them to know was called the FCAT, the Florida Comprehensive Assessment Test. So Florida's engaged in that work, and standards aren't something that you just write once and then you're done forever. It's something that you want to put into place and review and reflect and refine and get better. So in 1997, we adopted our first set of standards for all of our subject areas. And then between about 2004 to 2006, in that range, Florida did a review of those standards and updated them. And it took a few years, depending on the subjects that they went through. You know, we had formally adopted the next generation Sunshine State Standards, and then the assessments that went along with that was called the FCAT 2.0. Well, in 2010, the state of Florida adopted Common Core Standards, formally adopted Common Core Standards for English language arts and math. And those are the standards that we aligned our textbooks to, but we didn't align our own assessments to because they were part of a national set of standards that came with national assessments. And Florida was moving forward in that arena. Well, as that implementation was going on, people started having concerns about being part of a national set of standards where we couldn't make things Florida Pacific. We couldn't write our own assessments. It was kind of like a take it or leave it. So Florida began moving away from Common Core Standards. And in 2014, we adopted what's called the Florida Standards. And those are the standards that are actually current in place in mathematics and English language arts. And that's the standards that our Florida Standards Assessment is aligned to. But after we did that review of those standards, they were still pretty heavily aligned with Common Core. I would say there was some Florida nuances, but about 96% of the Florida standards were aligned to Common Core. And when we did that full review, we realized really quick, especially after talking to parents, we put out surveys, hundreds of thousands of people responded. We talked to teachers, leaders, experts in education, and we found some things that we knew we needed to improve on. And at that time, we decided to do basically a complete rewrite. It wasn't like we just took the standards that we had and just moved some things around and moved some commas around and said that we've improved them. We hit a reset, and it took us some time to do, but we were able to create a product that is Florida specific. It was created by Florida teachers and Florida professors and Florida experts. We did engage with some national experts to provide feedback, but their feedback went to the Florida work groups because we wanted to make a Florida product for Florida students. And the key differences slides that were on there is that we have formally, we can stand in front of you and say, as a state, we have eliminated Common Core from our standards. And it's not been eliminated. Thank you. It's not 100% been eliminated from our classrooms because that takes time, and I'll share the transition, but we're moving forward because as we adopt these standards, we got to train teachers on these standards, get textbooks online with these standards, and write new assessments. So that's moving forward, but we wanted to make sure that our students or our standards were grounded in the basics. And we heard a lot about people not understanding the math in Common Core. That's probably like the biggest frustration that we've heard, and I could tell I've lived that as a parent when I ran a school district and I couldn't even help my own third grader with their math homework because I had no idea what they were doing. So I was like, something's not right here. But what we found is that there was just a lot of focus on what was called conceptual fluency, and like in the math, and it was understanding the concepts of math. So you could have a basic math question. It could say, what's 11 plus 3? And the question would be to the students using a thought bubble strategy, regroup 11s to make 110 and how many remainders. And if the student didn't implement the strategy right, they could get the right answer, but they would get points marked off the question. And it was like, we want kids to be able to answer questions and have a foundation in math facts and what we call procedural fluency. Do you know your multiplication tables? Do you have those foundations? So strategies are important to help students, but we don't want to say this is the only strategy. We want to give the students the opportunity to find the strategies that work best for them and not mark them off because they used a different standard algorithm instead of the standard algorithm, where in Common Core, we would say, this is the standard algorithm for solving problems. Well, in math, there's multiple ways to get to the right answer. And we get students that come from other countries that use a different standard algorithm. And we would have to tell them, your way of doing this is wrong. You have to undo this and do it our way. And we're not doing that anymore. So it's really exciting. I could spend the whole time talking this morning about the work that we've accomplished with our standards, but the next slide just shows a timeline. So we were able to take these standards to our State Board of Education. We are currently doing an ELA textbook adoption now because it takes a long time to write these specifications, and we got to give the publishers time to write books. But we've been very clear with our textbook companies, don't send us what you sent us before. This is a complete rewrite. And if you think you're going to recycle something from another state that's aligned to Common Core or not meeting what we have spent a lot of hours, time, and energy on for setting those expectations, we're not going to adopt it. So we're really raising the bar on our expectations. Once the ELA instructional materials adoption is finished, then we'll go right into the math adoption. And that work is kind of gearing up behind the scenes. But while this is happening, we're also writing new assessments. So it takes about 3 years, but what'll be nice is, and I know everybody wish we could just flip this switch overnight, but in the next 3 years, we'll be fully aligned with standards, our curriculum, which is our textbooks, and our assessments. And Florida has not been aligned with standards, curriculum, and assessments since 2010, 2011. So this is a big deal for us to be able to get this across the finish line and have the support of the Citizens Alliance. So as we've been reviewing standards, we're not done. And we were fortunate with the legislature with giving us some tools in House Bill 807 last year, 807, which is around a civics standards review. We did a civics assessment review earlier, but now we're doing a review of our civic standards, and that is going on right now. And we've been working with teacher expert work groups, and they're making some recommendations. In fact, you can see the number of responders on the standard civics review slide, but we have a report that is due from Commissioner Corcoran to the legislature and the governor by December 31st. It's in statute. So we're on our timeline where our work groups are making recommendations and basically writing the report of what they're finding with our standards. And then they're also going to put things that we can do to make civics a better focus or just make our civics standards stronger. And then based on that report, hopefully we'll be able to have the tools we need to move forward with implementing the strategies in that report to do an update on our standards and get that done in time to do a new textbook adoption. So in about a 2-year span, getting the groundwork laid for the next 3 to 5 years for a complete redo of English language arts, mathematics, and civics is something that we're really proud of and we're engaged in. And that 2-year project, it's probably about a 7-year project that we're doing in 2 years, because I could tell you, if you've ever worked with Commissioner Corcoran, he doesn't have a lot of patience and likes to get things done fast. So we're really excited about that. The last couple things I just wanted to mention real quick, and I know the topic of this workshop today is around supporting students and human trafficking and some of those components. Commissioner Corcoran earlier last year recognized the need to do some more education around mental health and support for our students. and went to the state board. And we have some required instruction statutes. I believe it's 1003.42, which has about 19 different bullets of things that we're required to teach here in the state of Florida. And health education is one of those components. So we strengthened some of the stuff that we wanted in health education and went to the state board and put in some requirements, and then not only put in these requirements, put in reporting requirements of how districts are actually doing it, so that they have to show us evidence that these things are happening and we're not just being told that they're happening. But we put in a requirement for 5 hours of mental health instruction in grades 6 through 12th to be required for all of our students in our classrooms. And we put in K-12 required instructions around substance abuse and prevention, and then more importantly, child trafficking prevention education. And to our knowledge, we were the first state, and I think still the only state, to put in child trafficking prevention education as a requirement K-12 throughout the state of Florida. So we're pretty excited about some of the things that we've put in our mental health education and the resources that we've been able to provide and update. In fact, I brought a little brochure that one of the slides just shows this, the End Child Trafficking brochure that we've been engaged with at the state, and there's some extra ones in the back. Feel free to grab that and share that and give that to one of your teachers. I got about 2 minutes left, so the last couple things that I want to highlight is some of the success that we had working with our legislature over the last year or so. But celebrating, elevating teachers is something that was really important to our leadership, and we were able to put forth and implement. We're in the process of implementing some historic pay increases for our teachers and raising minimum salaries. While doing that, making sure that we've been able to expand choice options for families, and we've heard about the different scholarship programs, and making sure that parents are the drivers of placements for their students, and creating options and creating the conditions where they know their families and students' needs, and make sure that that's happening. Safety in our schools is still a big priority, and we work with our Bureau of Safe Schools, and making sure that when children come to school, that they're in a safe environment where they're set up for success. And then promoting civic literacy, we talked a little bit about that, and a big initiative of Commissioner Corcoran and the department is really, over the next couple of years, is going to be a bigger focus on early literacy. Commissioner Corcoran often says if we can get to 90 to 100% of our third graders reading at or above grade level, a lot of our other problems will go away. Right now, as a state, we're probably around 65% of our third graders are reading at above grade level. So focusing on our early learning programs, our kindergarten readiness, and building that foundation in literacy is definitely going to be a big focus and a lens for us. And then as the video showed some of the highlights, supporting the work around the Hope Scholarship, and making sure that families are aware that if they have a child that's being bullied or just not in a positive learning environment, there's options for them. They are not stuck. And we're finding pretty consistently a lot of these families who feel like they're stuck don't realize that there's opportunities out there for them. So anything you can do to help promote and market these scholarship opportunities is something that we want to be a partner with you in. And I think I'm used up on my time. I was hoping to do questions and answers. I don't know. I'll look at Dominique for that. But thank you again for allowing me to come give a highlight of some of the great work that's happening in the state. And we look forward to collaborating on future endeavors. So thank you. Sure. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, as a parent of three Marion County public school students, I'm greatly appreciative of all the work that you guys are doing and the expedited timeline and all of that. However, as a school board candidate, just 2 days ago in our school board work session, they were talking specifically about the B.E.S.T standards textbook adoption process and what that looks like locally. How your expedited timeline is terrific, however, it's actually not fast enough in some ways. So for this ELA curriculum,
Sure. So, great question. The question was around the textbook adoption timeline and if districts are going to have enough time to buy the textbooks, train, and implement. And the concerns that are being shared locally are real. And we've had to, the way our textbook adoption timeline historically goes into place had to be pushed back a couple months because we weren't done getting the standards written and put into place. So there's definitely a little bit of overlap. So what happens, right, and this happens every year, is as the state is reviewing textbooks, and basically we contract with textbook experts in review, and they have strong rubrics that go throughout each and every single standard, and then they write a report, and then we review those reports to see if the book makes the list or doesn't. While we're conducting that at the state level, districts are also doing that with textbooks at the local level. And the concern is are we going to be done with the state review in time for the local review that's going to be completed so that they can purchase, because July 1 is when our fiscal year starts, so that they can purchase and get the books in for training and implementation. So the way our timeline is built, yes, as long as we don't have any delays, and it's like, knock on wood, we can't have any more pandemics, any more hurricanes, we can't have any major of those life disruptors. But that review process is moving forward and fast, and we've put some things in place. In fact, shifted some staff around so that our review can be done twice as fast as it's being done historically, because we got to get that list to our schools. Then the districts can purchase those books, and then they want to roll out those books. But there's a little bit of transition time, about a year, because even though we're writing new standards, schools are going to still want to make sure their students are going to do well on the standards that get their school grades. So it's going to be an interesting time for about a year where there's a little bit of an overlap where we're trying to use new curriculum along with our new standards while making sure the students know the old standards that they're going to be assessed on, because there is some graduation requirements of passing those standards and promotion requirements. So it's a big project, but the question you bring up is a true point, and I have these conversations with districts often, but I'm very optimistic and hopeful without any major natural disasters, we will be able to accomplish this and get this done. So thank you. Yes, sir. So that great question. Question was around an executive order that President Trump signed around patriotism. Have we met that task, or is this aligned with the work that we're doing? I would say that patriotism education is part of our standards and our expectations. Whether or not it's strong enough and we can do a better job would probably be a different question. And that's, I think the timing of that works out well for us, because we have our civics review open right now, and that has been a topic of discussion amongst the work groups. So I feel very strongly when the report comes out by Commissioner Corcoran on some possibilities for next steps or way to make our civics education standards stronger, that will be a theme that will be embedded. So I would say, yes, we have some elements of patriotism, but I think the product that we're about to put forth is going to be a little bit stronger, a lot stronger in that arena. So thank you. Well, you guys have been great, and it's really an honor.